So I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with the microphone here, if that's on or not. Can you all hear me? Yeah. We're good? Okay. So I'm Jim Greene. I teach over in English and Modern Languages, and I'm going to talk to you today about a project that my students undertook last semester working with special collections over in the library. And just to give you a little context for this project, one of the challenges that I face in teaching this class, it's a class where it's very easy for students to recognize the skills that they're building in the class, to see the kind of small-scale details that they're learning, things like how to write a memo, how to format a business letter, when to use numbers versus bullet points in a list. It's easy to focus on those types of things in this class. It's a class where it's a little harder, it's a little more challenging for students to see some of the bigger picture questions that we really try to tackle in the study of the humanities. Some of the questions related to what I really am hoping that technical and professional writing as a class is helping people to think about, which are questions related to knowledge production. How reading and writing and editing are really processes not just of translating our thoughts into writing, but actually processes for discovering what we think and what's possible for us to think through the writing process. Specifically, this project helped my students start to think about some questions related to history and memory and how those concepts really function on kind of a social level. So what we did, we looked at unprocessed collections in the archives here in the ACTS library, and the students tried to think about what's here that's valuable, what's here that's interesting, why is it interesting to the community, why should this material be preserved or protected. And through that process, I really wanted my students to engage with some of the questions that you see up here. And I saw that process starting to happen. So over the course of this presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit more background on what we did briefly, and then I'm going to hand the microphone off to three of my students who are with me here today. I'll let them each introduce themselves, and they'll tell you about the collections that they studied, what they found, what was interesting in them, why they thought they were unique or relevant or interesting. And then we'll close with some thoughts from Steve Cox, who you've heard today already, curator of special collections. So just to give you a little bit more context, basically, like I said, we worked with unprocessed collections in the archives. So these were collections selected by Steve for us to sort through and make some sense of. And the students worked in small groups to go through that material. And what they're trying to produce, if you go on the library's website, you'll see under the description for special collections, some collections have a very brief report that explains what the contents are. Some collections don't have anything like that. So we were trying to write some of those short reports that would explain the contents of the collection for users of the library website. Students were also responsible for writing a brief feature article of about 500 words, something that would be suitable for publication in a place like the Pitt State Magazine or on the university website. And the goal with that writing assignment was to get the class to think about how to present this information to a more general audience. And hopefully in doing that, that would help them think about why is this relevant or interesting to the community? What's here that's going to be of historical value or significance? Is there something here that'll be of historical value or significance? Not all of these collections are going to immediately show you, they're going to scream out, well, this is something that deserves to be remembered and preserved. But that's one of the challenges, one of the questions that this assignment I think really helped them to start to think about. So like I said, I will now hand the mic off and let my students each explain to you what they found, and we'll start with Dillon Fleming.
Can I just speak?
Sure.
Yeah, like you said, I'm Dillon Fleming. I was in his English class, and he, as he mentioned, we had to look through these collections and try to find something interesting, which is easier said than done. We started out, we got in here, and we got all these boxes, and it took quite a few days to get down to the bare bones of the interesting things. So first off, I'll tell you what we had. We had my collection was the local 326 unit of the painters, decorators, and paper hangers, which was a labor union located right here in Pittsburgh. Their three main objectives were to ensure safe working conditions, provide competitive wages and benefits, and then to promote the individual rights of their tradesmen. And the slide you see up here is actually a rough draft of the State Right to Work Act. It mostly mentions that no one shall be denied employment because of race, religion, gender, or their affiliation with a union. And it's significant because many of the aspects in this letter actually were implemented into Kansas's State Right to Work Act. So, okay, this letter here is from an outside company, or to an outside company from the Brotherhood. It mostly just states that the company is performing work that's inside the union's jurisdiction, which they didn't really like that because they had no say whether the tradesmen were being, treated fairly or not. So they gave the company two alternatives. They could either have their employees list in the union or for them to hire union workers for the work. And then this last slide here is, our boxes were full of these. It's just federal laws and union regulations. And you can tell that the local 326 unit definitely did their homework because all of these books were marked up and down every page. So they were a very active union and they were definitely out there for their workers. And I'll hand it off now.
All right, I'm Alex Battitori. I was assigned to the L.V. Roper collection, and L.V. Roper was a Pittsburgh local who was probably best known for the time he spent on the Kansas State Legislature and also because he actually wrote several novels. This document here is a flyer from when he spoke at the English Department's Distinguished Visiting Writer Series. This is a series that is still ongoing today, and basically what they do is they ask prolific authors from around the state, around the country to come in and speak to students, talk about their works, do some readings from their works, and basically get people familiar with them from this area. And so it was actually a pretty big honor for Roper to have been asked to come and speak at this, especially because he was asked to speak on more than one occasion. And so I really thought this one was significant, particularly because it showed that he had a direct influence on the students of the university. They were able to come in and talk to him and get to know him, and he was able to exert his influence on them, maybe even get them interested in creative writing. The second image is of one of Roper's manuscripts called Love's Captive. This was part of a series that he wrote several novels for called the Candlelight Regency Romance series, which makes sense because this was a Regency romance novel. And I chose this one because when we first pulled it out of the box, we were a little bit confused because, as you can see, it doesn't say anything about L.V. Roper. It says by Samantha Lester. And it turns out that he actually had a pen name. And when he wrote these romance novels, he used that pen name partially because female writers tend to usually experience more success in the genre of romance writing than male writers do. So I thought that was a very interesting thing. Of course, he also did write several novels under his own name. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them, but The Overlord, The Reunion, those were all written under his own name. And then my favorite novel of his was also written under his own name, and it was called Hookers Don't Go to Heaven. It's available in the library. I haven't read it, but I bet it's interesting. Okay, these final two images are probably my favorite ones, mostly because they don't have a whole lot to do with his time during the state legislature. They have a little bit to do with him as an author, but mostly they just do a very good job of portraying him as an individual, as a regular person that you could walk by on the street and you could know. So these are his author business cards, and we pulled them out of the box and we're like, these are interesting. This is kind of a good thing to get your name out there. But then we opened it up, and it turns out it's kind of the exact opposite of a business card. And so I really enjoyed this one because, as I said, it didn't have a whole lot to do with his career, but it really showed that he was a person, that these documents and all these manuscripts and all these miscellaneous items belong to someone who, at one point, and still does, exert a lot of influence on this area, on the students, on this university, and that his legacy, even though he's passed away, is still felt today.
I'm Steve Benzel, and our group did ours over Harry Kundet. Harry Kundet graduated from here in 1967, back when it was called the Kansas State College of Pittsburgh. He graduated with a business administration degree. In his box were really random items, as you can see from this. It's just doodads. And we kind of came to the conclusion that these were just the items on his desk when he passed. More into the box were books about the 1950s, 1960s, and rock and roll, and things about that genre. He was also doing selling health insurance, and he generated millions of dollars into the community and was involved in a lot of the elections that happened around Pittsburgh, and was a very influential member to the community, and died untimely due to open heart surgery complications.
I'm Steve Cox, the curator of the Special Collections here, and I came here in August of last year, so I've been spending the time since then just getting acquainted with what we have here in the Special Collections at Pittsburg State University. And I've found that we're very similar to what you would find at any academic special collections, a large hodgepodge of collections, a large majority of them focusing on local history, and we have that with the mining history in town, in this region, the socialist activity that you've heard a little bit about over in Girard, a lot of former faculty papers, a lot of alumnus papers. But when Dr. Greene approached me in my second week here and explained what he was going to do, I was glad for that, because we have over 400 collections in the special collections, and these range from item that would fit in one folder to one collection that's over 200 linear feet of material. And of the 400 collections that we have here, only about 50 or 60 of those have really been processed and organized and arranged and are really suitable for researchers. So that leaves well over 300 left to do. And like most archives in the world, we're undermanned and have a huge backlog of unprocessed material. On the average, to process a collection correctly, it takes about 12 hours to do 1 linear foot. And when you have 1 or 2 people or a few students working on it, and you've got over 1,000 linear feet of unprocessed material, you've got a lot of work looking at you. So this has been very helpful to us in helping us decide for the first time what is in the collection. Is it worth getting it processed now, or as some of them find out, is there really not much there? One thing I hope the students would find out, and what I tried to help them with, but wasn't able to do it in every case, was not only do you want to know what's in the collection, what it's about, but you want to get the administrative record of that collection. When did it come in? Why did it come in? And who turned it over to us? Who donated it to us? Because most of our collections are donations. Some of them have been purchases. So in some cases, they were able to find that material, find out when, where, and why the material came to us. And in some, you just open up and instead of finding something that is just very fascinating and full of research potential, just say, why do we have this? And that is one of the hardest things in this line of work, is turning down donations. When people want to give you something, but it just doesn't have any kind of research value or display value, because there's a saying in this field that a gift is not, a donation is not free, because as soon as it comes in through our doors, we start investing money in it. The time it takes to process it, the archival quality containers that we must purchase to properly store that material, and housing it in an environmentally controlled location, storage unit. So those are concerns. In most cases, we can track the paper trail of the collection coming in, but in some cases, a few cases, we couldn't, or nor why it is that we have some of these things. And because it is so difficult to say no to donors who want to give you something, sometimes people in the past have just found it easier to take it and put it in the back, and then someday somebody's going to come through it and try to find out what it's all about, and it makes it a little bit difficult. But as through the next several years, as we have these classes coming in and doing these projects, they'll help us try to weed down and narrow down the collections that really need attention, need to be processed, that have a story that hasn't been told yet, or has information that needs to find its way into a history book. Thank you.